I've worked one-on-one with 400 founders and CEOs, and I can tell you the exact difference between those who are having the time of their life at 8 figures and those who are stuck and frustrated at 6 figures. And it's not their offer, not their market, not how much they work. It is how fast they collect feedback. Because stock founders rarely collect any feedback. But elite founders get feedback on every activity they do as fast as possible. And that speed difference explains everything. That's why they can execute consistently while everybody else relies on willpower. Why they have crystal clear focus on what matters while everybody else is distracted. Or why they compound everything they do instead of just throwing darts in the dark like most people. See, the mechanism is very simple. Fast feedback nudges them into automatic execution. And I'm going to show you how to engineer feedback loops in your day. Elite founders, they engineer feedback loops every single day, right after every work session. Not every week, not every month, every single time they sit down to work. You know that feeling when you hit send on an email and immediately refresh to see if they replied? That's instant feedback. Your brain predicted a response and it then checks if the response matches what the predicted. And that checking creates dopamine expectation. And elite founders engineer that exact feeling into the work. Not by obsessively checking email, obviously, but by ring fencing and time blocking every single thing they do and tracking their performance within every time block. And here's a very clear distinction of what the average person does and what an elite founder does. The average person sits down to work on outreach and writes some emails over 3 hours, gets interrupted 10 times, ends up not really clear on what was sent, checks if someone replied eventually, and does not really iterate on what they learned. So the brain gets no dopamine from that work. And the next day, in order to do that again, it has to force through willpower to sit down and work again. But elite founders on the other side, they time block 90 minutes. They have a very clear goal on what needs to happen within those 90 minutes. They have to test 2 subject line variations, 10 emails each, for instance. It executes without any distraction, checks responses at the end of the same day. Understand that subject line B got 40% open responses versus 15%. So the next day, it adjusts the next batch. And the brain gets dopamine from completion and from learning. So the next day, the brain is actually craving doing that work again. And it's the same activity with the different feedback speeds that create that massive difference in motivation and clarity. And this is the same mechanism that makes you check your phone 100+ times per day. You scroll, you see a new post, that triggers dopamine, then you scroll again. And that instant feedback loop is what is making you stay addicted to checking predictions. And what's happening is dopamine is not a reward chemical like most self-help YouTubers will tell you. It's a prediction error signal. Your brain predicted something, then reality happens and brain compares. And if reality beats the prediction, dopamine fires. So every time you pull down to refresh your timeline, your brain is checking, is there new information? Did anyone like my post? Do I have a new message? And that uncertainty is what creates a dopamine expectation. That is what nudges you into that automatic behavior. And that's how they program you to consistently check Instagram, Twitter, whatever, because they paid millions to teams that engineer exactly this. Elite founders know this, and they use the exact same mechanism, but to forcing execution instead of distraction. So if Instagram can make you check your phone 100 times a day, what if your brain could crave execution on what you need to do every single day? And this is a deep rabbit hole because really feedback loops are the only legit shortcuts in your life. If you get good at engineering your feedback loops, you can achieve in a year what others take a decade, because it creates the conditions for something called deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is perfect practice, something that requires 4 things: clear goal to know if you're improving, focus execution to make sure you're actually delivering on it, immediate feedback loop to understand if you actually did a good job, and then adjustment based on results. And elite founders engineer these conditions into every work session so they can learn 10 times faster. And the bonus thing here is that these same conditions also create flow states. Clear challenge, immediate feedback, visible progress. These are the preconditions of a flow state. So every time you ring fence or time block your work, you get instant feedback and you see yourself improving, your brain gears itself to enter a flow state. So you don't need to force focus or willpower or motivation. You are absorbed. And after 30 days of this pattern, and we know this because we track it with our clients, execution becomes automatic. You don't need discipline. You need to force yourself. Your brain is literally craving the dopamine that comes from consistent progress. And if you do it, you wait too long to get feedback. Even if you know you need to be doing specific things. You've known for months, but every single day you still don't do it. And that's because you don't have clear feedback loop nudging you into doing it. Here's an example that we see a lot in our clients when they start working with us. They want to do some outbound, so-called email campaign. They launched a campaign, but they wait days, if not weeks, to iterate on it. They're not clear on what they need to be doing in order to get better. So their learning is minimal or zero, and most campaigns just fail. But we have elite founders who literally send more emails than anyone else. They track their performance within 24 to 48 hours, that iterate subject lines based on that data, and within 1 week or 2 weeks, they have created more experiments than the average founders in a whole quarter. So they've learned what they needed to learn exponentially faster. Their learning curve is massive, and they're typically profitable within 1 to 2 weeks. And it is the same effort, but there's like 40x faster learner. The pattern is very clear. The tighter your feedback loops, the faster your brain learns. Faster learning triggers more dopamine, and more dopamine leads to more consistent execution. You can't shortcut learning itself, but you can compress feedback sleep to accelerate learning by 10 to 100x. And here's exactly how to compress any feedback loop. Get your current feedback time and divide it by 4. That's how you get the target feedback time. So imagine that you're getting feedback monthly on your campaigns. What if you can get it weekly? If you're getting feedback weekly, what if you get it daily? If you can compress the metric itself, change what you measure. So imagine you're tracking monthly revenue, but you can't check that daily. Well, change the metric that are daily leading indicators. So outbound messages sent, or response rate, or meeting books, or whatever. Those predict revenue, and they close within 24 hours. Like for instance, real example of a client who was stuck at about 40K a month, and he was tracking monthly revenue, but he couldn't pinpoint why growth has stalled. And what we changed is how he was measuring his progress. Before, he had a 40K revenue, but no idea really what was working. After we installed feedback loop in his business, he knew he had to send 20 qualified DMs every single day, and he would check same response rate before end of day. He would nudge those who were on the limit to book the next day, and every single day he would wake up with a couple or 3 or 4 new bookings that he had engineered the day before. And within 6 weeks of executing this, he finally got his first biggest month ever at about 60 to 70K a month. And he said, dude, I finally understand why you were telling me about just instituting feedback loops. The only thing I did was to change the system and train myself to expect those results to come. That's the power of feedback loops. And the easiest way to engineer this is through what I call ring fencing. Every work session has 3 components. Component 1 is a clear output. What am I practicing? And this is not work on outreach. This is specifically write and send 20 cold DMs with 2 different offers. Then you execute it within a 90-minute work session without interruptions, without the phone, just deliberately practicing the skill. And finally, you check the result of that effort. Did it work? Did it not work? What hook actually performed better? And that gives your brain dopamine from data and from learning. And the next day, you literally look forward doing it again with new data. And that's how you succeed. You act, you measure, you adjust as fast as humanly possible. So that's exactly what you should be doing tomorrow. Tonight, before bed, pick one activity that you do regularly but inconsistently. This is typically the thing that you're shying away from. It can be content, it can be outreach, it can be sales follow-up. Just pick one. And tomorrow, block 90 minutes on your calendar. Write a very clear output. What specific results am I creating? Turn off phone, turn off Slack, be unresponsive, execute uninterrupted. And at the end of the session, check what worked, what didn't, and more importantly, how you can become better tomorrow. And you'll see how you naturally start craving the dopamine from consistent momentum. This is going to help you move faster in business than any other strategy that you buy and you don't execute on. What you need is not more knowledge. What you need is to transform your knowledge into execution. And feedback loops is the ultimate shortcut to become addicted to winning. Train your brain to crave feedback and you will never go hungry, because you will then have started becoming the elite operator your business needs you to be.